fluorescent lights in St. Mary's ICU hummed like dying insects. Blake Hogan hadn't slept in 47 hours. His daughter Sophia lay motionless in the hospital bed, her small chest rising and falling with mechanical precision as the ventilator breathed for her. The monitors beeped a rhythm that had become white noise to Blake's exhausted mind. He sat in the uncomfortable vinyl chair beside her bed, his large hands wrapped around her tiny fingers. Blake was 34, a commercial photographer who specialized in architectural work. His job required patience, precision, and the ability to see what others missed. Right now, those skills meant nothing. His 8-year-old daughter was dying, and he was powerless to stop it. The first time Sophia flatlined was at 2:17 a.m. Blake watched the green line go straight, watched the numbers drop to 0, heard the alarm scream. Medical staff flooded the room. Someone pushed him aside. He stood against the wall, fists clenched, watching them shock his little girl's heart back to life. 43 seconds. That's how long she was gone. The second time was worse. 4:33 a.m. He'd been dozing in the chair when the alarms woke him. This time lasted nearly 2 minutes. Blake stopped breathing himself as he watched them work. When her heart finally kicked back in, he collapsed against the wall and wept. At 5:15 a.m., his phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but the name on the screen made him hesitate. Irma Harrington, his mother-in-law. Blake. Her voice was sharp, businesslike. No warmth. Irma? He kept his voice low, glancing at Sophia. The medical team had stabilized her again, but she was still critical. You still owe me $200 from poker last month. Blake's grip tightened on the phone. For a moment, he thought he'd misheard. What? $200 from poker? You remember, don't you? You said you'd pay me back within the week. That was 3 weeks ago. Irma, my daughter's heart stopped. Twice. Tonight. His voice cracked despite his effort to stay controlled. That's very sad, Blake. I hope she recovers. A pause, not for sympathy, but for breath. I need you to Venmo me the money within the hour. I have bills to pay. Blake stared at his daughter's pale face, at the tubes and wires keeping her alive, at the bandages and monitors that had become her world for the past 6 days. His mother-in-law was calling about $200. Are you serious right now? Money doesn't care about your personal problems, Blake. A debt is a debt. 1 hour. She hung up. He sat there holding the dead phone, feeling something cold settle in his chest. It wasn't shock. Blake had known Irma Harrington for 12 years, been married to her daughter Kristen for 10. He knew what kind of woman she was, but this crossed a line he hadn't known existed. Kristen was at their home, finally sleeping after Blake had forced her to leave the hospital. She'd been here for 5 straight days, and her exhaustion was becoming dangerous. They'd been taking shifts, though neither really slept. Their world had narrowed to this room, these machines, this fight for Sophia's life. The doctors still didn't know what was wrong. Sophia had been healthy, normal. Then 2 weeks ago, she started getting sick. Stomach pains, headaches, dizziness. They'd thought it was the flu. Then she collapsed at school. Seizures, organ failure. The pediatricians were baffled. They'd run every test imaginable. Nothing explained why an otherwise healthy 8-year-old girl was dying. Blake looked at his daughter. Sophia was small for her age, with her mother's dark hair and his gray eyes. She loved drawing, loved astronomy, loved asking questions that made him think. She was brilliant and funny and kind. She was his entire world. And his mother-in-law was worried about $200. The next 96 hours blurred together. Kristen returned at dawn, her eyes red and swollen. Blake didn't tell her about Irma's call. His wife had enough to carry. Kristen Hogan was 32, an elementary school teacher with a gentle soul that her mother had spent 3 decades trying to crush. She adored Sophia, adored Blake, and lived in constant fear of disappointing her mother. Blake had met Kristen in college. She was studying education, he was in art school. She was quiet, thoughtful, always helping others. It took him 3 months to work up the courage to ask her out. Their first date, she'd told him about her mother, warned him really. My mom is difficult, Kristen had said, picking at her food. She's very controlling, very particular about things. All mothers are protective, Blake had replied, naive and 22. Kristen had given him a sad smile. It's not protection, it's something else. He'd understood within 6 months. Irma Harrington was a 63-year-old woman with ice in her veins. She ran a small accounting firm, lived in a pristine house in the suburbs, and treated human relationships like financial transactions. Everything had a price. Everything was leverage. Love was weakness. Kristen's father, Melvin Harrington, had died when Kristen was 15. Blake had never met him, but from what he'd gathered, Melvin had been a quiet man who'd learned to stay out of his wife's way. Heart attack at 52. Blake sometimes wondered if it had truly been a heart attack, or if living with Irma had simply drained the life out of him. Irma had one other child, Kristen's younger brother, Sam Harrington. Sam was 28, worked at Irma's accounting firm, and was completely under her thumb. He never married, never moved out, never made a decision without consulting his mother first. Blake pitied him. On the fourth day after the Flatlines, something changed. Blake was reading to Sophia from her favorite book about constellations when he felt it. A slight pressure against his palm. He froze, looking down at their joined hands. "Sophia?" His voice was barely a whisper. Her fingers twitched. Once. Twice. Then they squeezed his hand with surprising strength. Blake lurched forward. "Sophia! Baby, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. The monitor started showing different patterns. Blake hit the call button, not taking his eyes off his daughter's face. "Come on, sweetheart. Come back to me. Please." Her eyes opened. Gray eyes just like his, but clearer than they'd been in days. They focused on his face, and Blake felt tears streaming down his cheeks. "Daddy." The word was raspy, barely audible around the breathing tube. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." The medical team arrived and Blake was pushed back again as they assessed her. Dr. Patty Burke, the pediatric intensivist who'd been overseeing Sophia's care, examined her thoroughly. After 20 minutes, she turned to Blake with cautious optimism. "This is remarkable," Dr. Burke said. "Her vitals are stabilizing. We'll need to run more tests, but this is the first real improvement we've seen." Over the next 12 hours, Sophia continued to improve. They removed the breathing tube. She could speak, though her voice was weak. Kristen arrived and sobbed with relief, holding their daughter's hand while Blake held them both. But Sophia seemed troubled. She kept looking at Blake with an expression he couldn't quite read. Fear, uncertainty, something she wanted to say but couldn't, not with all the people around. It was late evening, and Kristen had stepped out to call her brother with the good news, when Sophia finally spoke what was on her mind. "Daddy!" She pulled him closer, her voice urgent despite its weakness. "I need to tell you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" Blake leaned in, his heart racing. "About Grandma Irma." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "About what she did to me before I got sick." Blake felt the world tilt. "What did she do?" Sophia's small hand gripped his with surprising desperation. She was putting stuff in my food, at her house. Every time I visited, she told me it was special vitamins to make me strong like her. But Daddy, it made me feel funny, made me sick. Blake's blood turned to ice. "What kind of stuff? What did it look like?" "White pills. She crushed them up, put them in my orange juice, in my pudding. She made me promise not to tell you or Mommy. Said it was our special secret, that if I told, something bad would happen to you and Mommy." The cold in Blake's chest crystallized into something sharp and lethal. He kept his voice gentle, though fury was building in him like a tidal wave. "Did she say anything else? Anything about why?" "She said," Sophia's voice broke, "she said I was too much like you, that she needed to fix me, make me better." Blake's hands were shaking. He forced himself to breathe, to stay calm for his daughter. "You did the right thing telling me, baby. You're so brave. Is that why I got sick? Because of what Grandma gave me?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." Blake kissed her forehead. "And I'm going to make sure she never hurts you again." When Kristen returned, Blake pulled her into the hallway. The fluorescent lights made her look pale, fragile. He took her hands. "We need to talk about your mother." Kristen's face clouded with familiar anxiety. "Blake, please. Not now. Sophia's getting better. Can't we just..." "Sophia told me what Irma did to her." The color drained from Kristen's face. "What are you talking about?" Blake told her everything. Watched his wife's expressions shift from confusion to horror to denial to a terrible dawning acceptance. When he finished, Kristen was crying silently. "She wouldn't," Kristen whispered. But there was no conviction in her words. "You know she would." Blake's voice was hard. "You've known what she is for your entire life. We need to call the police, tell the doctors. They can test." "We will, but first I need you to think. Has your mother done anything like this before? Anything strange with Sophia? Any pattern?" Kristen closed her eyes, thinking. When she opened them, Blake saw the answer in her devastated expression. "The last 6 months," Kristen said slowly. "Mom insisted on taking Sophia every Sunday. Overnight visits. She'd never done that before. She said she wanted to spend more time with her only grandchild. I thought it was nice. I thought she was finally being a real grandmother. Every Sunday for 6 months. Blake's mind was racing, calculating. And Sophia started showing symptoms 2 weeks ago, right after the last visit." "Oh, God." Kristen covered her mouth. "Blake, what if I've been sending our daughter to..." "This isn't your fault." Blake pulled her close. "This is on Irma. Only Irma." But he could see the guilt eating at his wife. Kristen had spent her whole life trying to believe her mother was capable of love. This would destroy her. They called Dr. Burke back, explained what Sophia had said. The doctor's expression turned grave. "We'll need to run a comprehensive toxicology panel," Dr. Burke said. "If someone was systematically poisoning her, we need to know with what. This could change our entire treatment approach." The tests would take days. Blake knew he couldn't wait that long. He needed to know the truth, needed to understand why, needed to make Irma pay for what she'd done. That night after Kristen fell asleep in the chair beside Sophia's bed, Blake stepped outside the hospital. The October air was cold, sharp. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Nate, it's Blake. I need your help with something serious." Nate Knapp had been Blake's friend since college. He was a private investigator now, specialized in digital forensics and background checks. Blake had photographed Nate's wedding 3 years ago, had spent countless evenings having beers and talking about life. "What's going on?" Nate's voice was alert despite the late hour. Blake told him everything. The poisoning, the Sunday visits, Irma's cold behavior. When he finished, there was a long silence. "Jesus, Blake, you need to go to the cops." "I will, but I need to know more first. I need to understand what we're dealing with. Can you look into Irma? Deep background, financial records, anything unusual?" "That's going to take some digging." "I know. And Nate, this stays between us for now. I can't have Irma knowing I'm investigating." "Understood. I'll start tonight." Blake hung up and stood in the cold, looking up at the lit windows of the hospital. Somewhere up there, his daughter was sleeping, recovering from whatever poison his mother-in-law had fed her. The woman who'd called him during a medical crisis to demand $200. The anger he'd felt earlier was gone. In its place was something colder, more focused. Blake had always been patient, methodical. His photography work required him to wait for the perfect light, the perfect angle, to see what others missed. Now he would use those same skills to destroy Irma Harrington, but he would do it carefully, completely. He would make sure she never hurt another person again. The next morning brought new developments. Dr. Burke called Blake and Kristen into a private consultation room. Her expression was serious. "We've got preliminary results from the toxicology screening," she said. "Sophia has elevated levels of several substances in her system. Specifically, we're seeing evidence of chronic exposure to digoxin." "Digoxin?" Kristen looked confused. "It's a heart medication," Dr. Burke explained, "normally used to treat heart failure and certain arrhythmias. But in the wrong doses, especially in a child, it can cause exactly the symptoms Sophia's been experiencing. Nausea, confusion, irregular heartbeat, organ damage." Blake's jaw clenched. Where would someone get digoxin? "It's a prescription medication, fairly common for elderly patients with heart conditions." Kristen gasped. "My father. Dad had heart problems before he died. Mom might still have his old medications." Dr. Burke nodded gravely. "Given what Sophia told you and these test results, I'm required by law to report this to the authorities. This is a clear case of child endangerment, potentially attempted murder." "Do it," Blake said immediately. "Report everything." The police arrived within 2 hours. Detective Diane Strickland was a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She took statements from Blake, Kristen, and gently interviewed Sophia. Blake could see the detective's anger building as she listened to his daughter's story. "We'll need to search Mrs. Harrington's residence," Detective Strickland said, "and we'll be bringing her in for questioning." "When?" Blake asked. "This afternoon. We're getting the warrant now." Blake nodded. Part of him wanted to be there when they arrested Irma, wanted to see her face, but he knew he needed to stay with Sophia. That afternoon, while the police were presumably raiding Irma's pristine suburban home, Blake's phone rang. It was Nate. "I've got some interesting stuff," Nate said. "Can you talk?" Blake stepped into the hallway. "Go ahead." Irma Harrington's financials are fascinating. Her accounting firm is legitimate, but she's been moving money in some creative ways. Multiple offshore accounts, cash withdrawals that don't match any obvious expenses. And here's the kicker. She took out a life insurance policy on Sophia 8 months ago. Blake's vision went red. "What?" $500,000 policy. Irma's listed as the beneficiary. It's legal. Grandparents can take out policies on grandchildren with parental consent. "Did Kristen sign anything?" Blake thought back. 8 months ago. There was something. Irma said it was paperwork for Sophia's college fund. Kristen signed it without reading it carefully. That's probably what it was. Buried in the fine print. "Blake, your mother-in-law was planning to kill Sophia and collect $500,000. The pieces clicked together. The Sunday visits starting 6 months ago. The gradual poisoning. The policy taken out 2 months before the visits began. Irma had been planning this for nearly a year. "There's more," Nate continued. "I did some digging into Melvin Harrington's death. The official cause was heart attack. But Blake, he died in his sleep. No autopsy was performed because he had a history of heart problems. And guess what medication he was on? Digoxin. Bingo, I can't prove anything. But the circumstances are suspicious as hell. Wife's a nurse. No, wait, she's not. But she ran an accounting firm and would have had access to financial records, insurance information. She killed her own husband." Blake's voice was flat. "Maybe, probably. But it's been 15 years. Any evidence is long gone." Blake thanked Nate and ended the call. He stood in the hospital hallway processing. Irma Harrington wasn't just cold or greedy. She was a murderer. She'd killed her husband, gotten away with it, and then tried the same method on her granddaughter. And she'd almost succeeded. His phone buzzed with a text from Detective Strickland. Arrest made. Found digoxin pills hidden in a kitchen drawer. Also found documentation of insurance policy. She's in custody. Blake should have felt relief. Justice was being served. But all he felt was cold calculation. The legal system would handle Irma, but Blake wasn't sure that was enough. Not for what she'd done. Not for what she'd almost taken from him. That evening, Sam Harrington showed up at the hospital. Kristen's younger brother looked haggard, his suit rumpled, his eyes red. "Kristen," Sam's voice cracked. "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know what she was doing." Kristen stood to meet him, and Blake watched as his wife's brother collapsed into her arms, sobbing. Blake felt a flicker of sympathy. Sam had lived under Irma's control his entire life. He was as much a victim as anyone. "The police came to the office," Sam said. "Arrested her right in front of clients. It's all over the news. The firm is finished. Everything's finished." "What about you?" Blake asked, not unkindly. "Where will you go?" Sam looked at him with lost eyes. "I don't know. I've always lived with Mom, worked for her. She controlled everything. The house is in her name, the business, everything. I don't even have my own bank account." Kristen looked at Blake. He could see the question in her eyes. They had a spare room. Sam was family, damaged as he was. Blake nodded slightly. "You can stay with us, temporarily, until you figure things out." Sam's relief was palpable. Thank you so much. I'll help however I can. He stopped, looking at Sophia through the hospital room window. "I'm so sorry. I should have seen what she was doing. Should have protected." "You couldn't have known," Kristen said gently. "None of us did." But Blake knew that wasn't entirely true. He'd known what Irma was. He'd just never imagined she'd go this far. Over the next week, as Sophia continued to recover, the full extent of Irma's crimes came to light. The police found detailed records in her home office. She'd been documenting the doses of digoxin she gave Sophia, calculating how long it would take to cause fatal organ failure. She'd researched symptoms, treatment delays, insurance claim procedures. She'd planned it all meticulously, just like she'd planned everything in her life. Detective Strickland visited Blake at the hospital. "We're building a strong case. The DA is pushing for attempted murder. With the documentation we found, she's looking at 20 to life." "What about her husband? Can you reopen that case?" Strickland grimaced. "We're trying, but after 15 years with no body to exhume for toxicology, it's tough. We might get her on conspiracy or fraud related to insurance, but murder's a long shot." Blake nodded. He'd expected as much. Irma had been too careful with Melvin. She'd only gotten sloppy with Sophia because she'd thought no one would question a grandmother's love. But there was still something that bothered Blake. The money. Nate had found those offshore accounts, the cash movements. Irma was wealthy from her accounting firm, but the amounts moving through those accounts suggested something else, something more. "Detective, have you looked into her business practices? Her client list?" Strickland raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Just a hunch. The woman who tried to kill her granddaughter for insurance money. I don't think that's the only crime she's committed. We're looking into everything. But if you know something specific..." Blake didn't. Not yet, but he would. That night, after visiting hours ended and Kristen took Sam back to their house to get him settled, Blake made another call to Nate. "I need you to dig deeper into Irma's business. Client records, if you can access them. I think she's been doing more than just accounting." "Blake, the cops are already investigating. Why are you..." "Because I want to make sure nothing gets missed. Because I want to understand exactly who this woman is. And because..." Blake paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I need to know she'll never get out. Ever." Nate was quiet for a moment. "This is about more than justice, isn't it?" "She tried to murder my daughter for money, Nate. While Sophia was dying, Irma called me to collect on a poker debt. This woman has no soul. And I need to make absolutely certain she never has the chance to hurt anyone again." "All right, I'll see what I can find. But Blake, be careful. Don't do anything stupid." "I won't," Blake lied. Because he was already planning something. Something that would ensure Irma Harrington's complete destruction. The legal system would put her in prison, yes. But Blake wanted more than that. He wanted her legacy destroyed, her reputation annihilated. He wanted everyone who'd ever known her to understand exactly what kind of monster she was. And he knew exactly how to do it. 2 days later, Nate called with news. "You were right. Irma's been running more than just an accounting firm. She's been helping wealthy clients hide assets, evade taxes, commit fraud. I found communications with at least 15 clients where she's explicitly discussing illegal activities. Can you forward me everything?" "Blake, can you?" A sigh. "Yeah, I can. But what are you planning?" "I'm planning to make sure justice is served. Completely." The files arrived in Blake's email an hour later. Hundreds of pages of documents, emails, financial records. Blake spent the next 3 days going through everything, piecing together the full picture of Irma Harrington's criminal empire. She'd been at it for decades, helping clients launder money, hide assets from spouses and business partners, evade taxes. She'd made millions in illegal fees, and she'd been smart enough to keep most of it offshore, untraceable, until now. Blake had a talent for seeing patterns, for understanding how pieces fit together. It's what made him a good photographer, and now he used that same talent to build a comprehensive map of Irma's criminal network. But he didn't go to the police. Not yet. Instead, he created something else. A website, anonymous, hosted on servers that couldn't be traced back to him. And on that website, he posted everything. Every document, every email, every financial record, every crime. But he added something more. He included Sophia's medical records with Kristen's permission. The toxicology reports, the police reports, photos of Sophia in the hospital bed, unconscious and dying. He wrote a detailed narrative of what Irma had done, why she'd done it, and how she'd almost gotten away with it. Then he added information about Melvin Harrington's death, the suspicious circumstances, the digoxin prescriptions, the life insurance payout that Irma had collected. He created a complete picture of a serial killer who'd murdered for profit, hidden behind the respectable facade of a small business owner. And then he sent the link to everyone, every client whose crimes Irma had facilitated, every business associate, every person in her social circle, local media, national media, true crime podcasters, everyone. The website went viral within 48 hours. Irma Harrington became one of the most hated people in America overnight. Her clients were exposed, many arrested. The accounting firm collapsed. Her assets were frozen. Civil suits piled up faster than her court-appointed attorney could track. But Blake's favorite part was the federal investigation that resulted. The IRS, FBI, and FinCEN all got involved. Irma's offshore accounts were discovered and seized. The evidence Blake had compiled made their job easy. By the time her attempted murder trial began, Irma Harrington was facing over 200 years in combined state and federal charges. Blake attended every day of the trial. He sat in the front row, holding Kristen's hand, while prosecutors detailed what Irma had done to Sophia. Medical experts testified about the poisoning. Detective Strickland presented the evidence found in Irma's home. And Sophia testified, 8 years old, brave and clear-eyed, telling the jury about the special vitamins Grandma had given her, about the promises and threats, about how sick she'd felt afterward. Blake watched his daughter face the woman who tried to kill her, and he'd never been prouder. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was scathing. Mrs. Harrington, in my 30 years on the bench, I have never encountered someone with such callous disregard for human life. You attempted to murder your own granddaughter for financial gain. You poisoned a child, and the evidence suggests this wasn't your first victim. Irma stood silent, her face a mask. But Blake could see the rage in her eyes, the fury at being caught, at being exposed, at losing control. I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole on the attempted murder charges. This will run consecutively with your federal sentences for fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. You will spend the rest of your life in prison, Mrs. Harrington, and that is more mercy than you showed your granddaughter. As they led Irma away in handcuffs, she turned and looked directly at Blake. Her eyes were cold, dead. In that moment, Blake saw her clearly, not as a mother-in-law, not as a grandmother, but as exactly what she was, a predator who'd been stopped. 6 months later, Blake sat in Sophia's bedroom, watching her draw pictures of stars and planets. She was healthy now, thriving. The poisoning had left no permanent damage, thanks to Dr. Burke's excellent care once they'd identified the toxin. Kristen appeared in the doorway. Dinner's almost ready. Sam's setting the table. Blake smiled. Sam had moved out 3 months ago, finally finding his own apartment and a job at a different accounting firm. But he came over for dinner twice a week, slowly learning how to be his own person, free from his mother's shadow. I'll be right there, Blake said. After Kristen left, Sophia looked up at him. Daddy, can I ask you something? Always, sweetheart. Why did Grandma Irma want to hurt me? It was a question she'd asked before, in different ways. Blake knew she'd probably ask it for years to come, trying to make sense of the senseless. Because she was sick, baby, not like you were sick. Sick in her heart and mind. She couldn't love people the way most people do. And when people can't love, sometimes they do terrible things. Sophia considered this. Do you think she's sorry? Blake thought about Irma's cold eyes at the sentencing. No, sweetheart, I don't think she is. But that's okay, because we don't need her to be sorry. We just need her to never hurt anyone again. And she won't? Never, I promise. Sophia nodded, satisfied, and went back to her drawing. Blake watched her for a moment longer, then stood to join his family for dinner. The website he'd created was still up, still being shared, still ruining what remained of Irma's reputation. Her name had become synonymous with evil. True crime documentaries were being made. Books were being written. She would be remembered, but only as a cautionary tale, a monster who'd been stopped. Blake had made sure of that. As he walked downstairs, he felt no guilt about what he'd done. The legal system had put Irma in prison, but Blake had made sure her punishment extended beyond the prison walls. He'd destroyed her legacy, exposed every crime, left her with nothing but infamy. Some might call it excessive. Blake called it justice. In the kitchen, Sophia was telling Sam about a science project at school. Kristen was laughing at something ridiculous Sam had said. His family was whole, healed, moving forward. And somewhere in a federal prison, Irma Harrington sat in a cell, knowing that her granddaughter had survived, that her crimes had been exposed, and that the son-in-law she'd always looked down on had orchestrated her complete destruction. Blake smiled. He'd won. His daughter was safe. His family was together. And the monster who'd tried to take it all away would never hurt anyone again. The final victory came 8 months after the trial. Blake received a letter from the Bureau of Prisons. Irma had been attacked by another inmate, a woman whose daughter had died from neglect while she'd been embezzled by one of Irma's clients. The woman had recognized Irma from the viral website. Irma survived, but barely. She was in the prison hospital, would likely never walk again. Blake read the letter, felt nothing, and threw it away. Justice, he thought, wasn't always delivered by judges and juries. Sometimes it came from unexpected places. Sometimes it was patient and methodical, like a photographer waiting for the perfect shot. And sometimes it was absolute. That night, Blake tucked Sophia into bed. She hugged him tight, whispered, "I love you, Daddy," and fell asleep with her astronomy book open beside her. Blake turned off the light and stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. Steady, strong, alive. He'd protected his daughter. He'd destroyed the monster. He'd won. And that, Blake decided, was all that mattered.
And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.